When asked where the children were, the defendant told her aunt that she had killed them.
An emotional day in court for the mom accused of a chilling crime. Her hands clenched, her head down, as prosecutors talk about how she allegedly killed her 2 children in their home in a wealthy Boston suburb.
Wellesley, Massachusetts PD has been contacted to do a welfare check at that address. Put that in the call comment.
We're learning new information about what happened the night authorities say Janette Macausland showed up at a home hours away, across state lines, after she allegedly left a nightmare behind. Plus, the moment in court she broke down. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Janette Macausland appeared to be living the life that many people dream of. She was married, she had 2 children, she was working as an acupuncturist at a successful clinic, and she was living in one of the most affluent suburbs in the country. But then it appears she became a woman in crisis.
Your Honor, good afternoon. Your Honor, Jennifer Hickman on behalf of the Commonwealth to be asking that the defendant be held without bail.
This is video of Macausland making her first court appearance in Massachusetts since she allegedly murdered her 6- and 7-year-old children last month. The 49-year-old appeared emotional. She appeared tense during this brief hearing. Her hands were clenched together. Her head was bowed. She made no noise as attorneys spoke with the judge. These are photos from the AP showing a large cut that is still on Macausland's neck. And that cut plays into the narrative that prosecutors are now laying out about what happened. It is hard to believe that the woman we see in these pictures, in this gray sweatsuit, in custody, accused of a true nightmare, is the same person who appeared to be living this amazing life for so many years on the surface. Macausland lived in Wellesley, Massachusetts. Again, it's one of the most affluent suburbs of anywhere in the country. It's right outside Boston, and the Macausland's home was reportedly worth about $1.5 million. Macausland married her husband in Costa Rica in 2016, according to court documents, and then they had 2 children, Kai and Ella. When we searched Janette's name, right after her arrest, we found that she worked as an acupuncturist at a highly rated clinic outside Boston, and her profile and picture on that clinic's website was taken down as news of her arrest spread. It's hard to know at this point, truly, what was going on in Janette Macausland's mind, in her life, that would lead her to do what she is alleged to have done to her own children. But divorce records show that in October 2025, her husband filed for divorce. The complaint shows that he cited an irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. The document states Janette's husband wanted custody of their 2 children as well as their house on Edgemore Avenue in Wellesley. In November, Janette responded with a counterclaim. There, she said she wanted custody of their children. Now, this custody dispute appears to have gone to a new level last month. On April 16th, there was a motion that was filed for a neutral third party to look into who should have custody of their children, and what's called a guardian ad litem was appointed on the 21st. That is just 3 days before the call that came in that something had allegedly gone terribly wrong.
Wellesley, Massachusetts PD has been contacted to do a welfare check at that address. Put that in the call comment.
On April 24th, police in Bennington, Vermont were called to a home of who authorities say was Macausland's aunt. Bennington is roughly 120 miles from Wellesley. The aunt said that she wasn't expecting Macausland to be there.
Janette Macausland appeared at the home of her aunt, Sandra Madison, who resides in Bennington, Vermont. Ms. Madison later reported to Bennington police officers that the defendant had knocked on her window, and at first she had not recognized her niece. Ms. Madison observed the defendant to be hysterical and to have a large cut to her throat. Ms. Madison was brought the defendant inside and attempted to calm her down.
Something was wrong. Macausland's aunt told police that she noticed the blood on her niece's neck was dry. She said Macausland told her that she tried to take her own life. The aunt then said that Macausland allegedly told her this.
The defendant explained to her aunt that she had tried to kill herself. Ms. Madison asked the defendant where her husband was, and the defendant stated that he was at the lake. When asked where the children were, the defendant told her aunt that she had killed them.
Police in Vermont then called police in Wellesley, Mass. to go to the Macausland home.
Sir, could you head towards 63 Edgemore Avenue, do a check on that residence? Should be a Samuel Macausland and 2 children there. Coming from secondary PD.
Here's what dispatch audio sounded like as authorities made entry into the house.
1429 to 1403, there's blood splatter.
Initially, a call was made to get EMS on scene, but then that call was canceled.
Medic 1, disregard the well-being check, canceled prior to arrival with PD on scene. Police matter.
After confirming the defendant's residence, Bennington Police contacted the Wellesley Police Department and asked that they conduct a welfare check at that home. Wellesley Police responded to that location, Your Honor, and upon entering to conduct a well-being check, found 2 deceased children, 7-year-old Kai and 6-year-old Ella Macausland. The Commonwealth, again, Your Honor, is asking that the defendant be held without bail.
Within the hour of police making this discovery, allegedly inside that house on Edgemore Avenue, officers say they got on the phone with Ella and Kai's dad.
I'm sorry to keep calling you, but the father is on the phone now. Unconsolable on the phone. I believe he knows what's going on.
WHDH-TV has the arrest warrant for Janette Macausland. The details, they are difficult to hear, but police say Macausland allegedly admitted to officers that she allegedly strangled her 2 children in her bed, then attempted to take her own life. Her aunt told officers that Macausland allegedly told her, quote, "I wanted the 3 of us to go to God together, but it didn't work."
Ms. Macausland, this is Judge Corsones. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
This is Macausland making an appearance in court in Vermont after her arrest. It doesn't appear that she has a criminal record. In fact, in filling out a court document, she didn't know where to sign her name.
Go ahead and sign the waiver form.
I'm the defendant, sir.
Macausland was extradited back to Massachusetts, where she is now facing murder charges. Her attorney entered a not guilty plea on her behalf, and during the brief hearing that took place in Dedham District Court, prosecutors requested that she be held without bond. And this is what Macausland's attorney said.
Judge, there is at this point no opposition to that request, with the caveat that I would ask that you set it without prejudice. The reason is this. Between the date that I was notified of this case and today, the only discovery I have is a 6 or 7 page probable cause report. So I don't believe I'm in a position to fully argue bail and the questions regarding the Commonwealth's request on behalf of my client at this date. I don't know if you're aware, but I only for the first time met her approximately 20 minutes ago, so I've not even really been able to have an in-depth conversation with her. So I'd ask that you set it, but set it without prejudice. I would notify the court and the Commonwealth and file a written motion prior to just coming in and addressing bail at a future court date.
Yes, Your Honor.
I know it's also discretionary, and unfortunately the Commonwealth was not CC'd. I kind of did this last minute. There is a request on the minimus that she be sent to Chicopee, and the reason is that through my experience, both anecdotal and empirical, that they have the resources, the facilities, and they are set up for dealing with a situation with the attendant circumstances present here that might be necessary.
The judge ruled that Macausland would be moved to a women's facility in the western Massachusetts town of Chicopee. As the court determined her next court date would be in July for a probable cause hearing, we noticed that Macausland broke down as she was taken out of the room.
And it will be held without bail pending the probable cause hearing on Monday, July 13th. Want your client transported in?
Can I notify the court prior to that date?
Dan Shore joins us now, a former homicide prosecutor. Always good to have you here on Law and Crime. Really tough case, and that's saying the least. With everything that we were learning about what happened, Janette Macausland has, it seems, allegedly admitted to everything that she did to multiple people, her aunt, to the police. What does the court potentially do now, where it doesn't seem like that much of a mystery of what allegedly happened?
Well, from the prosecution side, even though it seems like a very strong case, there's confessions, other evidence that she did this, you still want to make sure that everything is done in a thorough, organized way. You want to make sure that all the forensic testing is done appropriately, that any evidence that's obtained is proper chain of custody, because if something is done incorrectly, that can undermine the case. People can get acquitted on technicalities, or there could be other issues. So even if it seems like a very strong case, which this is, the prosecutor has a lot of work to coordinate all the evidence gathering, making sure it's done based on best practices, and then ultimately, if it goes to trial, explaining it in a clear way to a jury.
Sadly, we've seen, there are multiple high profile cases of moms who have taken the lives of their children. And in some cases, there are strong mental health defenses. What about this case stands out to you when it comes to any sort of mental health defense that that her attorney may try? I know they're still kind of getting to know each other and all of that, but does any part of this case fit in that framework?
It seems hard to imagine a successful mental health defense here if someone presents what we typically refer to as an insanity defense in a case like this. Usually that's a defense of last resort when there's no factual or legal defense, which may be the case here. But the general standard for that is that someone doesn't know and appreciate what they are doing at the time. The classic law school example is someone is choking a person's neck and killing them, but they think they're squeezing an orange. Like they just don't know what they're doing. That's a classic insanity defense here. It seems like based on the confessions and other evidence that this was an intentional killing, that she told her aunt, for example, that she wanted both children and herself to go to God. So even though obviously that person has mental health challenges, it shows an intentional act to take the lives of the children. And that does not rise to the level of insanity. Just having mental health challenges is not enough to get out of a murder charge, or else many people who commit murders have mental health challenges and they would be able to escape prosecution. So I don't see it being successful here in terms of getting any kind of reduced conviction. Maybe there might be some leniency on sentencing, but the nature of the killings here, the alleged murder of a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old, there really doesn't seem to be mitigating factors to that we know of. And I would expect that a judge and a jury are not going to be swayed by any alleged mental health defense that she put forward.
How does the fact that she allegedly drove roughly 124 miles from Wellesley, Massachusetts to Bennington, Vermont, how does that factor into the story the prosecutors can tell about what happened?
Well, first of all, it undermines any potential insanity defense because someone who's insane can't drive that distance in a car. A car takes concentration, starting the motor, driving on roads, doing it safely, going to a specific destination many, many miles away. So that shows that she was understanding specific goals and able to obtain those goals. So I think it knocks out any insanity defense. In terms of what she was doing, it also shows consciousness of guilt, that after the alleged killings of these 2 children, that she went to a specific place to make a confession. She went far away from the scene of the crime. So I think this all goes to consciousness of guilt, undermines a mental health defense. And then obviously the confession that was allegedly made there really supports the prosecution as they're going forward to obtain a conviction here.
She was with her husband. They had been going through like a custody dispute. They had been going through a divorce that started, according to court records, in October of 2025. And then leading up to what allegedly happened on the 24th, there was a guardian, a third party that it appears was going to come in and then, help decide what custody was going to look like moving forward. We don't know what that guardian ad litem had discovered, or if anything had gone to that point. We don't know if the divorce, frankly, is the motive behind what allegedly took place. But how could that, even if it, not being like this official motive, bumper sticker on what happened, but like, how could that factor into this case, that she was going through something that could be seen as traumatic emotionally in her life leading up to what allegedly happened?
Well, as you said, it might contribute to motive. It might be a reason why she was taking these acts. But I don't think that part of the prosecution's case is really that important. If they can show, and it sounds like there's a mountain of evidence and confessions, that she intentionally took the lives of a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old, then I don't think her motive is that important. That alone, that evidence, that confession is going to be enough to get a conviction here. Maybe these extra details help the prosecution tell a story to the jury if it goes to a trial. But ultimately, you have the evidence of the killing, you have the consciousness of guilt, you have the alleged confession. It's really a very powerful case for the prosecution.
And if all of that, everything was done to a T by law enforcement and getting the confession, there's no issues pre-trial that could be found, that evidence could be suppressed. What do you do as a defense attorney, at that point? Like how can you help your client when it seems like she's laid everything out allegedly at this point for the prosecution?
Well, 2 things. One, even though I just at length explained why a mental health defense probably won't be successful, I would expect them to offer a mental health defense because there doesn't seem to be a factual or legal defense. So the defense will offer maybe insanity defense, some other mental health defense. That's what I've seen in the cases I've prosecuted. And that's really important. And second of all, the defense attorney tries to negotiate a plea agreement with the prosecution. They know most likely there's going to be a conviction here. So part of the role of the defense attorney in a case like that is to try to get the best deal that they can. If this defendant is convicted at trial for the murder of 2 children, her own children, I would expect her to get life in prison. So for a defense attorney to be successful, it would mean negotiating a plea agreement that's anything less than that. So even some decades in prison, which sounds like a tremendous amount of time and is a tremendous amount of time, that would be better than spending life in prison for her. And I believe she's 49. So even a couple of decades is taking her well into older age. So, but that's what a defense attorney will try to do, negotiate a plea bargain and offer a mental health defense. And then also challenge procedurally certain evidence to try to knock out certain evidence or say that there's some technicality. But here there's such a mountain of evidence in the confessions, it's hard to see the defense attorney being able to do that.
How common, is it, and as your time as a former homicide prosecutor, when you were doing that work, do you see kind of these marital or custody issues lead to maybe not something as horrific as what she allegedly did when it comes to her own children, but even, taking anyone's life is horrific. But how often do you see these custody cases lead to issues like what we're talking about here?
Well, it's very rare that you see a case like this where someone takes the lives of their own children. Usually in these custody cases, when they've come across my desk as a prosecutor, it involves some kind of intimate partner violence situation where both people want to care for their children and they're arguing over who gets custody or how they're going to have custody. And that may lead to a violent assault between the couple or something like that. I've seen cases like that I've prosecuted. But in terms of one parent taking the lives of 2 children, that's something that fortunately we hardly ever see. And that's why it's so shocking to read the account here.
Yeah. And, she has this gash across her neck, and she did, apparently has allegedly admitted that she was trying to take her own life. Mm-hmm. Is that seen as a mitigating factor? Could it be seen as that this was someone who, that this was some sort of, does that factor into the defense? I mean, it just seems like at this point, it's such a strong case for the prosecution. It is hard to find, at least at this point, what could be on her side in a trial.
I would see it the other way. I actually think it helps the prosecution because her taking her own life and the gash on her neck corroborates that, shows that there was a thought out plan here. Yeah. Not a well thought out plan, but a thought out plan. And the reason why it's important to have a thought out plan for the prosecution perspective is it shows intent to kill. So the fact that she tried to take her own life, killed 2 of her children allegedly, and then told her aunt that she wanted the 3 of them to go to God, in her words, that shows that this was an intentional act. And that, again, undermines any insanity or mental health defense. So I think that gash on her neck and the fact that she tried to take her own life, that is going to corroborate the general theory of the prosecution that this was a plan to kill all 3 of them.
She's next due in court on July 13th. It's going to be for a probable cause hearing. We're still very much in the beginning of the process. But how soon in cases like this, where it seems like the prosecution has a lot of evidence on their side, like how soon does a defense attorney maybe approach about some sort of plea deal?
I would think pretty soon. One thing the defense usually wants to get is as much evidence as possible based on state discovery laws and weigh the strength of the case and then make a determination about what is realistic. But here, there's so much evidence. I think right away they would probably start talking about some kind of plea bargain. The other thing, though, to consider on the other side is that she's going, unless something really unexpected happens, she's going to be in prison for a long, long time. So there's no rush to work out a plea bargain. Usually, if a misdemeanor case and someone's sitting in jail, the defense attorney will rush to do it to try to get them out of jail. That's not the case here. So they might want to do it while they can. Sometimes the prosecution is more able to give a plea bargain earlier in a case, and that when they're closer to trial, they're less likely to because they've already worked and built the case and they are ready for trial. So those are some considerations. But the prosecution's really going to dictate the pace here when they say they want to negotiate. And they may not. They may say, we're just going to trial. Yeah. We feel this case is extremely strong and we don't need to have a plea bargain.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because in Massachusetts, there's no death penalty. So that's not like a bargaining chip that someone would have. Like, what is the appetite for a prosecutor in a case as horrific as this? A lot of attention on it for sure. What is the appetite to settle it with a plea deal and concede anything, knowing that you feel pretty good about if you were to go into a trial that you'd be the one coming out with a guilty verdict?
Well, I think that the prosecution is going to feel very confident in their case, but any case can have surprises in terms of something going wrong, evidence being tampered with, or just not being collected in the right way. Sometimes also a family just doesn't want to go through this. This is a high profile case now in terms of the media, and maybe the family of the children says to the prosecution, we really don't want this going on for a year or more in the media where we're constantly being asked about it. So we'd ask you to try to get the best deal you can. So those are some reasons a prosecutor may make a plea bargain here. On the other side, though, they don't want to send a message to the community that someone is being treated in any kind of seemingly lenient way by getting a plea bargain after killing their 2 children. And the fact that she is 49, I believe that was her age, then I think that it gives less room for a plea bargain, because you're certainly not going to get something less than 20, 30 years at least in a case like this. And so if she was 25, maybe they would reach a plea bargain where she gets out in her 50s or 60s even. But I think at this point, there's not much room for a plea bargain that's going to leave her anything short of very old age if she's still alive when she gets out of prison. So that kind of ties the hands of both sides.
Yeah, it certainly does. Just a terrible, terrible case. These kids were 6 and 7 years old. We'll see what happens next. She is going to be in a women's facility for the time being out in Western Massachusetts. Dan Shore, former homicide prosecutor. I know you do a lot of writing. I know you've written books. I know people can find your work on Substack. Where can people find more about some of the work that you do?
Sure. Yeah, I investigate a lot of cases of misconduct. I used to prosecute homicides, and I use a lot of the cases I've investigated to write fiction. My latest novel is called Open Bar, and it deals with some of the tough issues that I've confronted as a prosecutor.
Yeah. No, Dan Shore, always great to have you here on Law&Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me on.
Janette Macausland is next, due in court for that probable cause hearing on July 13th. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we're also now streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.